Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Consumer-Led Approach to Innovation, Electric Vehicles. My name is Anthony Schiavo, Senior Director and Principal Analyst here at Lux Research, and I will be moderating today's session. Presenting today are my colleagues, Alina Strugut, Research Director, and Urvi Mehta, Senior Research Associate here at Lux Research. Throughout this webinar, you can type any questions you have in the questions box on your screen. Time permitting, we will answer all the questions we can. If your question does not get answered, please do not hesitate to email it to questions@luxresearchinc.com and we will respond. If at any point you experience technical difficulties, such as a frozen screen, simply refresh your browser and check that your internet connection is strong. Now, let's jump into the discussion.
Thanks, Anthony. Hello, everyone. My name is Urvi, and it's a pleasure to have you all here. So I wanted to talk about something before we go to the consumer-led approach. In energy, trillions of dollars gets invested before adoption is proven. EVs, for example, are one of the clearest stress tests of the energy transition because they force the system to perform under real human behavior, not models. That's what we are here to talk about. Alina and I want to introduce to you the Lux Innovation Helix, a strategic decision framework that treats innovation not as a straight pipeline, but as a choreography between the two forces. What people need most urgently and which technology is ready to deliver. We are going to cover four things today. First, we will start with the innovation dilemma, the tension a lot of you are navigating as of today. Second, we will introduce the Helix and how it lines up human urgency with technology readiness. Third, we will apply this to the electric vehicles, a tough real-world stress test for adoption. And finally, we will leave you with a few practical actions you can take as you evaluate your investments and partnerships. This isn't theory. It's a way to reduce risk in capital allocation and get your timing right.
Henry Ford once said, "If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses." And even today, that quote gets used a lot to suggest that people can't truly articulate what they need or what they want, and that innovation happens because of visionaries out there who simply know better. And that could be true, but I'm an anthropologist and I see it differently. It's not that people don't know what they want or what they need. It's just that too often we're asking them the wrong questions. We often ask them for solutions instead of listening for friction. What frustrates them? What's slowing them down? What feels hard, risky, or annoying in real life? Einstein put it better when he said, well, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on it, I spent the first 55 minutes figuring out the right question to ask. So if Ford had asked the right questions, he probably wouldn't have heard faster horses. He would have heard something deeper, like I'm stuck, I'm constrained, I need freedom and reliability. Those are people's real unmet needs, and that's what makes the difference between invention and scalable innovation. Because innovation scales when it solves a real tension in people's lives, and that comes from listening deeply, from asking the right questions, and understanding them. Every year, nearly 30,000 new products hit the market, but the vast majority of them fail. And why do they fail? Well, it's not because the technology is bad. It's because technology and what people need are out of sync. Fair enough, geopolitics, economics, regulations, they all play a role, but underneath it all, it's people. So on one side, we are pushing technologies because they're feasible, they're exciting, they're innovative, but people don't care, or even worse, they're opposed to them. Just because we can build something, it doesn't mean that that will be immediately adopted. And that's how you end up with problems in search of solutions. Sorry, that's how you end up with solutions in search of problems. On the other hand, consumers are actually pretty clear about what they want or what they need, but solutions arrive too late or never, or by the time those signals reach the years of R&D, the roadmap has already been locked and the window of opportunity has passed. So what does this tell us? It tells us that when what we can build and what people want, when these two forces don't meet in the middle, organizations lose clarity on where or when to invest for real impact. And that's the innovation dilemma. Not knowing what to prioritize or when, because people and technologies are out of sync. And that's when we see the symptoms: fragmented strategies, missed time launches, missed opportunities. And in energy specifically, misalignment doesn't just cost adoption, it costs infrastructure, it costs capital, credibility. It's very expensive. Well, let's see how expensive it will be.
Yeah, let's look at that. The adoption of EV was assumed to be instant, relying on consumer curiosity and policy backing, especially in the US. And this is where they misread the people, actually, how people actually use cars, and that too in different regions. The average US light duty vehicle travels 30 miles per day. That's what the Department of Transportation says. But frankly, that is not the case. If you look at the cities like Houston or Dallas, a person travels 60 miles per day. And that is the difference how we look at the people and their patterns. Range anxiety has always been the issue with the electric vehicles, but lack of confidence in edge cases like winter charging has been a killer. GM registered a loss of $6 billion as they are changing their EV strategy. Similarly, there are other companies as well: Ford, Porsche, Mercedes Benz. And the biggest problem we look in the last 5 years of announcement is that all of this are facing a challenge to change their strategy. What is the bottom line between all these companies is they were trying to force a full electric vehicle transition before mainstream buyers were compatible with the trade-offs. In fact, GM did a consumer survey last year after investing billions of dollars to understand that why their cars were not making into the market. The market did not reject EVs. It rejected a EV strategy built around producer ambition rather than the consumer habits.
Now enter the helix. I want you to just imagine two strands twisting upwards in motion like DNA. One carries the pulse of human demand. That is people's frustrations, their aspirations, their needs. The other one carries the force of technology, the breakthroughs and capabilities that are ready to be applied. Where these strands meet, bonds form. Each bond marking the exact moment where a real human need connects with the technology. Where bonds cluster, they show you where innovation is most likely to surge, the biggest growth opportunities where innovation can scale. But just as important is what happens where bonds don't cluster. When they are sparse or they're scattered, the absence of clear clusters is not a failure of the model, it's a signal. It shows areas where human demand is high, but hasn't yet been matched by a viable solution. And that's untapped territory. It has high potential, but it requires exploration, development, or reframing before they can scale. So that's what the Helix does. It connects human need with ready technology to show you where to act, as well as what to keep an eye on and where to reposition existing capabilities. Now, in energy, a lot of clients aren't really losing sleep over consumer sentiments. Many energy companies are not what they're thinking is about CapEx, asset lifecycle, infrastructure, long-term bets, questions like, how do I ensure grid reliability while aggressively transitioning to intermittent renewable resources? Or when will the EV adoption peak? And how do we retrofit existing infrastructure before consumers put gas stations out of business? Right? These are the type of questions that keep energy players at night. They're making system level decisions. But the reality is that those systems only work if people actually integrate them in their lives. And that's the gap that the Helix solves. So inside organizations, that gap or dilemma or the innovation dilemma shows up differently for different teams. Executives, for example, you see a lot of breakthrough technologies moving fast, but too many of them never scale. The risk, what's keeping you up at night, is pouring billions into assets that stall or missing demand and ending up with stranded investments. The Helix helps you cut through all that noise so you know what's actually worth backing. R&D. For R&D, your pipeline is full. Storage, hydrogen, carbon capture, grid tech. What keeps you up at night is not knowing which bets deserve acceleration and which ones will collapse after years of effort because people don't care or they're opposed. So the Helix connects your capabilities with real human need, ensuring that your pipeline stays relevant and your bets are validated early. And marketing or insights professional within that same company, well, you know what people want or what they need, but too often those insights never really shape what actually gets built. The Helix turns your work into strategic direction, giving you a front row seat to innovation. So different roles, the same innovation dilemma, and the Helix gives all these teams inside the same organization, gives them all a common language and a shared way to solve that innovation dilemma, turning insight into action and possibility into performance. Now, here's a quick overview of the process behind the Helix. Each Helix starts with decoding the consumer strand, where our team of PhD anthropologists analyze hundreds of thousands of online conversations and product reviews to identify people's real unmet needs. And once we have those, we prioritize them based on urgency. Next, our STEM colleagues decode the technology strand. They're mapping which capabilities are truly able to meet those consumer needs today and which are still emerging. And once we have that list, we prioritize those technologies by readiness. And finally, and this is where the magic happens, we create the bond. We quantify the alignment between each human need and each technology to reveal the strongest growth opportunities where technological push and human pull align. And then we look for high scoring clusters and map them to figure out the best timing. Now, this all sounds quite abstract, so let's break down each step. As I mentioned, each Helix starts with decoding the consumer strand, with understanding people's unmet needs. And for this, we use a jobs to be done framework, which is a simple but a very powerful way to see behavior as purposeful action. It's action with a purpose. People don't just buy products, they hire those products to get something done, to solve a problem, to feel a certain way, to express who they are. But often there's friction. There's tension between what they want and what the current solutions deliver. And that friction is the most important because it shows you what prevents them from getting what they want, and that's the most reliable signal of opportunity. One EV user told us, a short vacation felt nearly impossible, chargers are rare off interstate, hotels have the wrong type, and running out could mean a huge towing fee. Another one said, well, it's great for my daily commute, stressful for everything else. Hot or cold weather drains the battery fast, every station needs a different app, long trips are a nightmare. So if you think about it, the job is simple. I want to drive long distances. But when you see how people talk about it, what you hear is anxiety. And it might seem like it's all about their technical complaints, but underneath it all, it's something deeper. And think about it. For over a century, the car has meant freedom, autonomy, independence. You get in, you go. You don't negotiate with the system. But what we hear now is that mobility requires vigilance. You gotta plan routes, you gotta monitor the weather, check charger compatibility, you gotta budget time. So mobility has shifted. It has shifted from independence, freedom, and autonomy to managed dependency. And that creates anxiety. Now, a few words about the data. Each Helix uses AI to analyze 50,000 to 150,000 real consumer conversations from over 20,000 consumers. So what we get is not a list of opinions. It's a map of human friction that's showing us what people are trying to do and what's getting in their way. Now, once we understand what people's unmet needs are, the next question becomes, which ones should we invest in first? Because not every need will scale. So for that, we developed a new metric to prioritize them, which is the needs urgency. And to calculate it, we use 3 proprietary database indicators. We use share of voice, which is all about momentum. It shows us how loudly people are expressing a pain point right now. We also look at cultural maturity, which is about timing. It measures how much consensus exists among consumers and how ready they are to adopt new solutions. And we also look at population reach, which is about scale. To how many people will this need be relevant in the near future? Combine these 3, and you get this future forward score, which is showing you where momentum, timing, and scale intersect and allows us to prioritize the needs. And when we look at the results on the right-hand side, one thing becomes clear. It's less of a car problem, and it's more of a system problem from the consumer's perspective. The least urgent needs are about the car itself, battery, intuitive interface, but the most urgent ones are about everything around it. Range anxiety is number 1. That's not surprising. We already touched upon it. But look at number 2, hassle-free repairs. That's where the system gets stress tested. The moment something breaks, you don't know where to go. Technicians are hard to find, parts aren't immediately available. You're tied to dealers and hidden costs just emerge. So yeah, it's inconvenience, but it's also that moment where the loss of control becomes most visible. We also see that low home energy bills is the 4th most urgent need. EVs were supposed to simplify costs to save money, but many are saying, well, my electricity bill is going up and I don't understand why. So charging at home has turned a clear one-time expense into something that's invisible, that's ongoing, and that's making costs much, much harder to track, to predict, and to control. So Once we understand where friction shows up, the question becomes, what can actually remove it? And that's where the second strand comes into place. You are muted.
Thank you, Alina. So for the second strand, we now decode the technology side. Here we identify which technologies are most capable of meeting those human needs. We first start with the Lux Innovation Radar, where innovations are selected based on a proprietary methodology called the Lux Rubric, which is based on innovation prowess, market momentum, and urgency. For example, one of the data points that we use for the initial first step is the Lux Tech Signal, which consolidates data from patent trends, VC funding, government funding trends, academic research trends, as well as our own proprietary Lux data is one of the many data points used in the first initial step. This targeted first step allows us to create a comprehensive view of relevant technologies and capabilities for a given use case, EV in this scenario. Next, we evaluate the readiness of each technology across three dimensions, allowing us to prioritize these technologies. Stage of development, classified as concept lab, development, introduction, or scale. Developer landscape, the number and maturity of active players in the scenario. And lastly, time to scale. If the company is not scaled or the technology is not yet scaled, the estimated time to reach that stage, it is determined by our Lux analyst. What you get is the output which you see on the right-hand side of your screen. It is a visual map of technology prioritized by readiness, with technologies at the top showing which are ready now, like the large language models. And towards the middle, you will see the technologies like sodium-ion batteries, which are still emerging. And at the end, the lowermost are the technologies which are still early stage. So instead of endless list of promising innovations, you get a clear evidence-based view of what's actionable today and what can be actionable tomorrow. And when we layer this against the consumer's trend, we are ready for the final and most powerful step, creating the bonds. This is where it all comes together. When we connect the two strengths, consumer urgency and technology readiness, bonds begin to form. Each bond shows where a real human need can be met with a viable technology. On your leftmost column, you have technologies ranked and prioritized by readiness from the top to bottom. On the top row, you have consumer needs ranked and prioritized from left to right. And here is the heat map. Each cell represents a potential bond evaluated by our STEM analyst with the number 1 to 5, that is the scoring, as well as with the shading put together, showing the strength of alignment. Higher scores and darker shades indicate stronger bonds. Lower scores and lighter shades mark weaker or emerging ones. The heat map is the analytical backbone of the Lux Innovation Helix. It reveals where urgency and readiness connect most powerfully, the genetic markers of growth. That's what makes Helix so powerful. It visualizes alignment.
Remember the innovation dilemma that we began with and how this is experienced by different teams in your organizations? Executives, you want to cut through the noise. There's too many signals, too many opinions out there. R&D, you want to keep your pipeline relevant. You want to translate science into solutions that people will actually use. And consumer insights, you don't just want to diagnose problems, you want to drive action early on. So in the following, Urvi and I will show you how the Helix solves for all of this while also giving everyone a common language that connects strategy, technology, and insight through one shared model so each team knows exactly how their work ties into growth. So let's start with insights. Typically, you are passengers in the innovation process. You are surfacing people's needs and desires, but then you watch others decide what gets built. So the Helix changes that first by involving you in the process right from the start, and then by using your work as strategic direction for whatever comes next. Take hassle-free repairs. For example, this is the second most urgent need, as we discussed it. It's not just about inconvenience and repair costs, but it's also that sense of losing control that makes ownership feel risky. Now, the Helix shows you how this need connects with technologies that can reduce that sense of risk, and how it connects with OTA software updates, for example, to address any software issues remotely. It also connects with battery swapping. And based on how these technologies are prioritized, we can see that they're not quite ready. So they're up and coming. But this is important because suddenly, for insights teams, you can walk into any meeting and not just say, well, here's what consumers want, but here are the technologies that deserve acceleration, right? Here's how we can deliver against consumers' needs. So you're no longer reporting from the sidelines, you are shaping the roadmap.
Yeah, so for R&D and technology leaders, the Helix becomes your compass. You are surrounded by potential AI models, battery technologies, and charging techniques. But the question is, which one deserve prioritization and therefore acceleration? The Helix highlights where your existing capability aligns with the most urgent human needs. In this case, let's look at the battery swapping. As you can see, it connects to most of the pain points that the consumers have, right? The reducing range anxiety or as a fast charging in winter. But however, you can see that it is far below the readiness. And the case is because it has issues, right? Standardization of the batteries or had number of high capital costs for setting up a battery swapping stations. But though it is not commercially viable for R&D team, it opens an innovation opportunity. The Helix helps the R&D team to answer not just what we can build, but what is most needed right now in the market. Lastly, for the executives, for example, if you're looking at the corporate strategy and innovation, this is where it all pays off. Your challenge isn't lack of ideas, it's too many. The helix cuts through the noise, revealing clusters of opportunities where consumer urgency and technology readiness meet. For example, let's look at this cluster. You see that the top two consumer priorities, reducing range anxiety and hassle-free repairs, align with the four technologies, that is large language models, lithium-ion batteries, 3D printing, and auto software. But if you look at this cluster, it's the scoring of most of them is 3 or below, which shows that it is not quite ready. It is weak. The helix does not just identify the opportunity cluster, it also reveals the white space, the areas where technologies may be technically interesting but are not ready to be strongly aligned with the consumer needs. Ford is a good example of what happens when the gap becomes too expensive to ignore. In February this year, Ford CEO Jim Farley, during their fourth quarter earnings call, reported a loss of $5 billion, stating the customer has spoken, and that's a punchline. And let me tell you, this is not just about $5 billion, it is more than that. First of all, over the next 2 years, they are almost seeing a $19.5 billion write down to restructure their strategy. Why? Because customer has spoken, as Tim Farley said, and the EVs are not selling out. They are canceling most of their manufacturing for Ford 150 Lightning. And thirdly, they are also slashing battery capacity, not only in terms of manufacturing capacity, but battery capacity or the battery size in the vehicle as well. Remember the buzz it created when the Ford 150 was launched? This is not we expected at that time, right? So, does this mean they are moving out of the electric vehicle and the battery market? No. But they are realizing the first plan was ahead of the customer requirement. So, what they are going for? They are shifting to EV, not ESS, sorry, not our focus today, but a parallel stream of revenue by going into the energy storage business. The next, they are launching a hybrid F-150, 700 miles of range. Remember the first consumer need, range anxiety, the issue. This resolves that. And thirdly, they are launching a EV platform, an umbrella term representing affordable EV launch with LFP batteries, which gives you high cycle life, so means lower repair costs, and also launching an EV with a $30,000 to $35,000 price point. That is a cheaper, much more cheaper than what they have today, coming in line with the consumers. Having said that, if we relate this to the Helix that we were talking about, range anxiety is the number one consumer issue. We have said that. But the executive question that has been asked till today is which future battery sounds most impressive to resolve that? That has been done until now, right? Improve lithium ion. If it's not working, go for the software which can make it better, or invest billions of dollars into solid state batteries. I'm not saying that we have to go against innovation, but the real question for today is which technologies are ready enough, cheap enough, and scalable enough to reduce friction now, to make the market viable. This is why this analysis does not tell you to jump automatically from lithium ion to solid state, just because solid state looks better on paper. On, on paper is not the market. And I know everybody wants one chemistry that resolves the issue, but there is no single magic bullet solution today. But the winning strategy over the next several years is likely to be pragmatic, not heroic. Better lithium ion, a bit of an incremental lithium ion, lower cost architecture, smarter software, stronger charging economics, and in some cases, hybrid vehicles as a bridge where they solve the consumer job better than a pure EV as of today. And the market is reacting to it. We can already see the changes into the market by launch of lower cost vehicles or lower cost batteries like LFP being placed in place of NMCs, keeping consumers in between the strategy. And that will become the driver for EV adoption uh, in the future rather than the subsidies. This is the strategic value of Helix to help you eliminate the uncertainty. Having done that, once these insights are connected, the Helix drives value in five powerful ways. Sorry. The first being new product creation, revealing unmet needs that can be solved right now. The next, product enhancement, improving existing offerings by addressing top consumer pain points like extending battery life in cold weather or providing them with an insight so that they can charge at a point where the charging is not completely off out in the EVs. Repositioning capabilities, taking underused R&D assets like battery diagnostic algorithms developed for pack management can be repositioned for used EV battery certification, warranty analytics, or far-fetched second life screening. Discovering agencies, applying proven tech across sectors. Portfolio prioritization, focus resources where adoption likelihood is the highest. And lastly, have a foresight, knowing where adoption will happen fastest and timing your innovation accordingly. The Helix doesn't just show you what's possible, it shows you what's worth now, next, and later.
So it should be pretty clear by now that technology centric roadmaps are over and that the future of innovation starts with human insight. And when it comes to key takeaways related to vehicles, to electric vehicles, first, winning in EV isn't about choosing between today and tomorrow. It's really about balancing both, and the leaders will be the ones who deliver value with what's available now while quietly building advantage for what's coming next. Second, despite all the hype, this market won't be defined by one big breakthrough. It's going to evolve steadily through incremental improvement in batteries, in cost, design, improvements that over time fundamentally reshape the experience. And third, and maybe most important, adoption won't be driven by the car itself, improvement in the car itself. It will be driven by economics, things like fuel versus electricity prices, financing, the total cost of ownership. This kind of things will ultimately determine whether EVs make sense in people's lives or not. A few closing remarks. What to do next? Well, first, engage with the Helix. Use it to uncover where human needs and technological capabilities reinforce each other. Those types of intersections where innovation has both pull and power. This is a tool for innovation ideation, essentially. Second, use it to set clear priorities, to decide where to act now, where to invest for long-term growth, and where you need to pivot. So you don't end up chasing everything, but you focus on what matters the most. Third, use it to align your teams, to bring executives, R&D, and insights under one shared framework. So decisions come from the same playbook instead of all the separate silos. And finally, measure, learn, and evolve. Each Helix cycle strengthens the next, helping you track results, test assumptions, and really feed new learnings back into the process. Because innovation isn't a one-time thing, it's a living process. And the process is finally within your control. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, Alina. Thank you, Urvi. We'll now be taking questions that you may have on the presentation. You can type those into the question box on your screen. If we don't get to your question on this call, someone from Lux will be in touch after the webinar. So we have a few questions here on the Helix itself. I thought that might be a good place to start. And I think a big question or a big theme from the questions we've been getting is identifying, what are good times or good technologies or areas to use this framework. If you're one of our clients in the innovation sector, how do you know, that it's the right time or the right approach to be sort of using this particular framework?
Overall, the best use case for the Helix is to de-risk innovation, to find those areas where there's discrepancy between your roadmap and what consumers, but we talk about consumers, but what we actually mean is local communities, people on the ground. So where's the gap between your roadmap and what people actually need and are willing to adopt, are willing to support? Because if you are moving against them, there will be backlash, and that might not materialize in consumers not buying your product, but it might materialize in regulations, in activist movements blocking you in a lot of ways that will negatively impact your building. So use it to bridge that gap between the innovation that you're trying to pursue and people who will eventually be impacted by it. And this can apply in anything, whether you are building data centers or you are creating, you are modernizing the grid, or you are creating your roadmap for 10 years. People are the one variables that are harder to measure because they are more volatile, so to say. We like to think that we are rational, logical beings, but more often than not, we're not. So measuring that pulse is very important.
So on that note, you mentioned data centers, you mentioned some of these other areas. What would you say to more B2B companies or companies who are a bit, their products maybe aren't being sold directly to consumers? Um, how should they be thinking about the Innovation Helix, and how should they be leveraging the Innovation Helix?
Yes, even companies that don't sell directly to consumers are also impacted, because think of consumer or people. They're forming culture, right? There is the context, is the air that we breathe. So that transpires into stakeholders, like I said, regulations, your suppliers. So that is everywhere. So even if you're not selling directly to consumers, you're still feeling the consumer pulse. That's one aspect. The other aspect, let's say you are really interested in identifying the gaps when it comes to your supplier. So you can use the jobs to be done methodology, just change the data set. So instead of looking how consumer reviews products online, we can use your internal data set on how suppliers talk about your product, or how technicians, in the case of operating different systems, talk about the problems and the needs that they have. And we apply the same methodology to uncover their unmet needs and to see where's the gap between what they need, what they want, and the solutions that we're bringing forth.
All right, I think that's about all we have time for. So I'll say thanks again to my colleagues Alina and Irvi. That'll conclude our webinar today. The slide presentation and recording from this webinar will be sent out to all attendees via email today. After leaving the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a survey on today's presentation. And we really appreciate any feedback that you may have. This helps inform and improve our future webinars. Also, you can take a moment to check out our upcoming webinars on our website. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.